We're here to talk about ROI in enablement. It's like the big three letters for enablement and how do we do it. So my name is Lauren Bailey. I'm your host this morning. I'm the founder of Factor 8. I spent most of my career in sales leadership and enablement. So I kind of made the hop over. My last corporate gig was running the global training strategy for SAP when they were going to virtual sales. And then 15 years ago, I started Factor 8, helping work with frontline sales leaders and sellers. So I love working with my enablement piece. Joining me today is Deniz Olcay. Will you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Yeah, Deniz Olcay here from Allego. I lead our marketing team, and my background actually includes also being a seller. Believe it or not, I sold Canon copiers door to door during the recession in rural Massachusetts. That's certainly a humbling experience. But after that, I spent a lot of my time in the sales methodology space as a training facilitator, training hundreds of sellers and sales leaders on better optimizing their conversations and effectiveness as sellers. And most recently now I am at Allego, and we are a revenue enablement and sales enablement software company for modern sales and marketing teams. We are trusted by around 25% of the Dow Jones companies, and we're rated highly by analysts and users in the space. And really our goal is to help lift the efficiency and productivity and effectiveness of sales teams with technology. So that's who we are at Allego.
Love it. So Deniz represents the technology side. Factor 8 represents kind of the skills side. So this is a look at some of our clients and companies, and we work with certifying BDRs, AEs, account managers, even that critical shift from rep into manager and how tough that is. So that's where we play. And we do lots of free edutainment. And I love this. My enablement peeps, you'll get me. Edutainment, right? Like, let's come get some ideas in webinars, but no, we don't expect behaviors to change. Whereas my leaders of sales are like, oh, well, I sent them to a sales shot with LB. They should be able to do this perfectly now. Not always the case, but we still invite you and your teams to join us. At Factor 8, we do at least one a month. We call them sales shots because we keep them fast and furious and really tactical and focused. We do them for sellers, we do them for managers, and we do them for enablement people. And some of our next two are for y'all. So the next one in September is about getting promoted to AE or BDR to account manager or ISR. It's basically every role in sales and how to get ahead. And then the others, we're going to talk about that sales budgeting. We're going into that cycle. And then myself and my amazing mentor, Sherry Leviton, are putting on a 4 pillars Train the Trainer certification. It's a master class. It's not tied to a particular curriculum, which I love. You don't have to go pay $10,000 to be Challenger certified and only be able to train Challenger. This is about how to be a better trainer, coach, facilitator, and entertainer. The 4 pillars. So that might be right for you and your team. And you can find that stuff on our website. And I think Amy's going to chat in one for our 4 pillars. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate you. All right. So here's what we're covering. I like this. These are your words, Deniz, right? A revenue driver, not a cost center.
Right.
I think that's cool. Yeah, I think that's important. And that's really what we're all striving to be. So how do we do this as a team sport? We're really going to dive into what do you measure that matters. So we're going to translate a little bit for you, those sales results that the sales leaders are looking for. And then we'll talk about ROI. I've seen, sadly, companies spend a lot of money on stuff that just doesn't work. And that's sad. Right. I have a new client who was telling me, I won't out the training company they used, but they spent $500,000. And it's this like super boring video-based e-learning that's just sitting there and nobody's taking it. And that just breaks my heart. Right. So we're going to show you how to do it better if you're building or if you're coming off a bad experience or you're just trying to decide what's out there and what should go. All right. So this is the fun part where I attempt to launch a poll. Let's just see if it'll happen. More and poll questions. Here we go. We're launching poll number 1. Help us understand who you are. Are we an individual contributor? Oh, I've got some right away in marketing. I've got trainers and sales leaders. It's fun because when you're on this side, you can see it move.
Yeah, I see the dynamic results. But
This
yeah,
is great.
understanding who you are helps us really tailor the content, right? We want to make sure that this is a valuable investment of your time. And we appreciate you taking part of this quick poll.
All right, looks like the movement has stopped. I'm going to end in 3, 2, 1. Share the results. Your peers are here with you. Our sales leaders, our enablement people, our trainers, our marketing leaders. This is cool. So what I really loved about last time Dennis and I did a webinar together was the sharing that was happening in the chat. So when you hear something you like, give it the shout outs, ask questions, keep it going. It's not like it's lonely sometimes in what we're doing. So let's make this work. Good. I love that we've got a really interesting mix. And my sales leaders have snuck in. Thank you. I love that. Hi, my Factor 8 people. Hi, Melissa. All right, we're going to stop sharing and we are going to, oh no, I've got one more I want to ask y'all about. This is poll question number 2. Where do you line up? So this is interesting, right? A lot of folks in revenue enablement line up under operations, not revenue. Right now, my sales leaders, I get it. You're going to line up under revenue, right? So we're going to see that win because we've got a bunch of sales leaders here too. We've got some that are reporting into people, right? Report alongside revenue to a third leader like a CEO. This may be a 3-way tie. Interesting. Anybody, feel free if you've already voted. Tell us in chat what you like or don't like about what's happening here. Because I'll tell you, when I started my first training department, this was before they used the words enablement, we were reporting up to people in HR, and I broke it out and said, nope, we're going to split sales or revenue enablement from regular enablement, and I want to go line up with revenue. But I didn't want to report to the guy because he was kind of a jerk. So I reported alongside him to the top leader, and I really, really liked that alignment. Here we go. We are ending and sharing. So interesting. I'm going to assume that our winner here being revenue because we have so many of our revenue leaders here. But when we look at our enablement, like that's a decent split, right? Reporting alongside revenue to leadership. It sounds like you guys are loving what I did and loved there too. Sales ops and enablement. We're the only ones who know we're supposed to be supporting the CRO's goals, says Amy. Amy, say more about that. That's interesting. Interesting. All right, I'm going to wait for you to do that, but I'm going to stop our share and let's jump on in here. Oh, forgive me. I didn't advance the slide while I launched the poll. Here we go. Let's jump into revenue driver or cost center. And for some folks, especially my sales leaders and my corporate leaders out there, Dennis is going to answer this question first. What the heck is sales and revenue? What does that mean to you, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to align on this definition, and you sort of alluded to it, right? Before sales enablement was sales enablement, there was sales training, right? And I think sometimes those terms get convoluted and mixed. Certainly, sales training is a part of sales enablement, but it's certainly not the only part of sales enablement, right? So when we think about sales enablement or revenue enablement, it's really the coming together of client-facing teams, right? Whether that's customer success, that's marketing, and that's sales really coming together to drive revenue for the business. And they do that in a couple of ways, right? They got to onboard and train their talent. That's something that's a given. They need to launch and roll out new products, new service lines, right? New messages to their teams so that they're armed in those face-to-face conversations. That content they need to support that client dialogue and interaction is really important. And the message they're trying to convey, right? It all kind of ties back to some of the training and the certification and really the fluency and competence in that and being able to do that in client-facing interactions. Obviously, with the advent of Gen AI and technology, now digital selling and using digital channels as a way to engage your buyer is becoming more and more important, right? It's not only face-to-face interactions, but it's being able to sell on Zoom. It's being able to sell by using web portals or digital sales rooms, the new kind of technology category emerging there.
Right.
Obviously, what you need collaboration, you need coaching, right? You need your reps and your client-facing teams to learn from one another, right? And that's primarily how you drive engagement, by the way, right? Yeah. Not by dropping an e-learning course, but actually showing them what good looks like. And also by giving the coaches the materials and the support they need to have developmental coaching conversations, right?
So Dennis, when you and I talked about this last time, we got a lot of interesting comments in the chat around this. Like enablement, folks. I love that we have some sales leaders here with us because you know what? You're the bane of our existence. But we're frustrated with you because it feels like you don't always coach, right? Our enablement team's number one issue and challenge was that the managers aren't coaching what we're training. And that was the biggest challenge. So I know that you want to talk about the rest of enablement, but while you do that, I'm going to ask everybody to chat in. Which one of these areas is your biggest challenge? Let's listen to this audience. And Dennis, I know that I interrupted you. Keep going. You're working your way around the circle.
No, I think this is a worthwhile point to emphasize, because what we've seen in some of our primary research of we actually conducted a research of around 300 revenue enablement leaders just back in April of this year, and we asked them the question around like, what are some of your top challenges? And it really related back to time, right? And having time to sell for sellers and having time to coach for managers, right? And again, as we think about ROI and giving value to the business, we're going to talk a little bit about this throughout this webinar, but using time as a way to measure impact to the business is A, it's tangible, and B, it's usually pretty easy to calculate if you're measuring it in the right way. So I think we're going to introduce some ways to kind of give back that time to your managers so that they can coach, and also give back time to your sellers so that they can sell, right? So I think those are kind of two really important distinctions making as we kind of talk about this. And it's just something we've seen in the research. It's the top challenge, time.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you're talking about here is that in efficiency, not just effectiveness, right?
Exactly.
And that's the goal. I think, you know, like we said, sometimes enablement is seen as a cost center instead of a revenue driver. Well, sometimes we're seen as a time taker, right? Not a time giver, not an efficiency giver.
Totally. And I think sometimes we all try to make the leap and say, hey, I did this training. Let me try to tie it back to how much more effective a seller is, right? And it's a tough exercise, right? It's certainly one component of what makes a seller effective, right, but it's not the only one. But I think what you can start to do, and easy ways to get to ROI, is really around efficiency, right? And giving sellers back time to sell, right? And what you can start to do is really tally up that time, and you can start to make the case that, hey, if I saved 8 hours, that's 1 day of selling, right? And you multiply that, and let's say, eventually if you say, hey, I saved enough time to equate to a full year's worth of selling time, that's 1 rep, right? And how much does a rep create in terms of quota and bookings in a year? Now you can start to make the association from time to business value and money, right? So I think the subtlety there in being able to calculate the time and make the case that, hey, I've saved so much time that actually equates to a full-time rep, and here's how much our full-time reps are bringing in a year. Now you can start to make the case for, impact in terms of dollar value for the business.
Yeah, you guys, that's a really good nugget to steal. We're all looking for ways to prove ROI. And if we can find out ways that we are, even anecdotally, saving people time, and then add that all up and turn it into, right, what does that look like in headcount? I think that's really cool. I love that. But your point here is also valid, right? We're all trying to measure the effectiveness, but it is lacking. So doing both is going to be
correct. Yeah, effectiveness is a bit more of a lagging indicator. And I think this is where coaching really comes into play, and having the right mental model for a coaching framework, having the, arming the tools or the frameworks and giving them back the time to coach, because that's sort of your leading indicator for success. If you're having those types of conversations, right, then you know that your reps are going to eventually be more effective. But
that's hard. So I find this fascinating. So listen, I'm old enough that I watched everybody tool up over the last decade. And I knew the pendulum would shift back, and here we are, folks, right? Tools are combining. We're trying to get rid of tools. Maybe the economic downturn has actually helped us in this way. When I do benchmarks, I work with hundreds of different sales organizations, and I have yet to see one where the sellers are effectively using all of their tools, right? And tell us more about this stat.
Yeah, and again, look, at Allego, we're a tool company, but it is not past us that, sellers are drowning in tools, right? How do we make it more efficient for them to get what they need in the tools that they're using. We know that CRM is sort of a center of gravity or a key tool, right? We know that enablement typically is a key tool. Some technology organizations are using tools to kind of facilitate their BDRs to kind of outbound emails. But the reality is, 28% of sellers' week is spent on selling because they're drowning in these tools and tasks, right? So how can we give them back that time to sell? And I think that's just a universal challenge that you'll see. This research is from Salesforce and HubSpot and other technology companies as well. But that's why I'm really stressing that point, because I think we can all think about, ways in which our sellers are either vocalizing that they need more time to sell, or our managers are saying they don't have time to coach, right? So why not take that, as a way to add value back to the business and start measuring the impact that you're delivering there, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's really interesting. And listen, you're about to share, let me share your next slide, because here are a bunch of different ways that you can go find time to give back to folks. And I have a slightly different angle on this. And the angle I have is that we may spend at least 30% of our time not selling. In fact, I believe that only 30% of a seller's time, up to 40, is actually spent selling. Yep. Right? So now we've got this 60, 70%. And of that, half of it is what you're just talking about, right? Like, I'm doing these things. I think a lot of it is also based on fear. When we increase confidence, we increase phone selling time. I'm just going to take a skills-based approach to that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? When I'm afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody, I go spend that time in a tool, right? But I'm doing anything I can to not spend that time picking up the phone, right? That call reluctance. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which should be no surprise, because we all have kids who do not understand that the phone dials out. So why is it so damn noisy out there? Why is my inbox flooded all the time? I get fewer and fewer sales calls. I kind of love that. It's cool again, right? Like, voicemails, cool again. Nobody uses them. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But when you're looking for ways to remove barriers, these are some things you can look for in ways that you can prove your leading indicator time savings, right, Dennis? Any big ahas here?
Yeah, no, completely. And I just wanted to draw attention to a great chat comment by Michael. Thanks for commenting, right? He says, if you're ineffective at engaging buyers, it doesn't really matter how much time you have, right? And I think that's why it's really two sides of the same coin. Time is certainly important as a measure of ROI, but effectiveness, you can't, let that out of your sight. But I think a good way to also prove value with that in mind is really just look at your top performers, right? So look at your top performer. How much time have you given back your top performers? And how much does that equate in terms of impact to the business? And I think for your low performers, it becomes a conversation about, how can I put them on the right development plan? Are they actually doing some of the activities as a leading indicator, right? Are they attending the trainings? Are they rating them highly? Are they engaged, right? Are they doing some of the coaching conversations? Great. If they're doing that, chances are there's probably going to be some lagging indicator of, hey, we hope to see some of those results in the field, right? So the way that you might look at your top performers versus your low performers for measuring ROI could be different too, right? You might take a more efficiency-based approach for your top performers, but you might take a more kind of like effectiveness-based approach for your low performers, right? So it's sort of like different sort of mental models and visuals for the different audiences. And I think
very true. Yeah, very true. In fact, we love to say that your biggest bang for the buck when we're working with our frontline sales leaders are those B performers. That's where you want to invest the most time and coaching. So, right, somebody was sharing earlier that most are spending time with the top 10%. I anecdotally see the opposite. I see us spending time with the bottom 10%. And if you want to have the biggest ROI when you're looking at effectiveness and efficiency, focus on those Bs and helping them graduate up to As. All right. So this is about switching from the idea of the cost center to the revenue driver, right? Old way, new way of thinking. What are the big takeaways here, Dennis?
Yeah, and I think I saw some comments earlier. I believe it was from Michelle. Love that kind of phrase of kind of cost center versus revenue driver. But I feel like enablement has sort of over time gotten bucketed into sort of a cost center mentality, right? It's going to take time out of the field. It's going to I have to fly all my reps to somewhere to take a training, right? It's seen and perceived as that, but we know it's not, right? We know that enablement is critical to drive revenue. And I think it's incumbent on us as revenue leaders whether you're sales leaders, where some of you are here today, or an enablement organization, or even those marketers there who are supporting from a content perspective, we have to make the case that the investment of these initiatives is actually tied directly to impact and revenue for the business, right? So instead of thinking how much does the training cost, it's more like how much are we investing in training, right?
Have you seen that? Have you seen that cartoon where the boss comes out and says, "But what if we spend all this money on training and they leave?" And right, and the guy comes back and says, "What if we don't spend the money and they stay?" Right? I love that one. I love that. It is an investment in your people, and if you're not doing the investment, people won't stay either, right? This new generation gets it. Study after study after study is talking about how that career development, which is formalized training opportunities, coaching and development, access to leaders, those are like the top 3 things they're looking for. Then you want a paycheck, and then it's right, am I adding value to the world, and am I giving back, and my life balance and all those good things. But this generation cares a lot about getting their training and development. So sales leaders, that is the time you are spending with them, talking about their career and giving them coaching. And enablement leaders, it's what you're offering to them in order to help them grow.
Yeah, and I think if we get these kinds of questions within the organization, I think we can safely assume it's some people that have been stuck with that old mentality or old way of thinking. And I think the point of this webinar is really to give you the way to kind of reframe that conversation, right? So someone asks you, how much does the training cost? We're like, well, you know what? Let me actually show you how it's lifting performance and saving time, right? So it's sort of like that subtle dance of replying to that in a way that really ties it back to value versus saying like, oh, you know what, here's how much it costs, right? It's our responsibility to make that ROI case so that we as enablement teams are seen as strategic to the business, and you are seen as strategic to the business, right? So it's a skill set we actually need. Yeah.
Hot tip, steal some of Dennis's words here and bring these to your next meeting. Sales leaders, if you're meeting with enablement people, use some of these words and phrases and ask the questions, right? Help them help you. And enablement leaders, what an opportunity to use some of this language as you're walking over to the sales folks, right? How can you help me prove that enablement is boosting sales? Right? How can I help offer an immediate return? How can I help drive revenue growth? All of these are incredible words to use with leadership to help that alignment. And the leaders who really get it are going to ask you in return about ROI. So, right, this is the easy way. It's the basic calculation, right? Why is it so hard to prove ROI, Dennis?
Yeah, and I think that it's sort of like people fall into that trap, right? They get asked the question, how much is this costing us? And it's pretty easy to figure out the cost, right? It's like, hey, we spent this much time, we paid this much for a facilitator, we paid whatever it was, $500,000 for, whatever method company that we brought on, right? And typically it's easy, like, hey, you just answered the question, but really you're creating a bigger problem of perceiving, right? Or having the enablement team be perceived as a cost center, right? So I think it's our job to really put in the effort. It does take a little bit more time, right? And it takes a little bit more effort and discovery and really being intentional about what you want to measure, right? And that's the net return piece that we're talking about, right? Do you look at it from a time perspective? Do you look at it from an effectiveness perspective? What are your leading and lagging indicators there that you really want to track? So putting that effort in helps you, again, down the line, make the case that you're actually driving business impact, not just cost, right? There's always a cost, but there's always, that return piece that's sort of hidden behind the surface, right?
100%. And here's the thing. You may not have been asked for this yet, but oh my God, you don't want to be surprised by the ask.
Oh.
Enablement's being cut. We've all seen our comrades fall. Don't be the person who's not thinking about this because nobody's asked me yet. Okay. So when you go into engagements with revenue leaders, my enablement peeps, and my revenue leaders, here's what to do with your enablement peeps. Decide together at the beginning how you'll measure success. Now, we've already given you about 10 different ways when you're looking at sales cycle length and time, and we're about to give you 200 more that you can pick out 3 or 4 nuggets for your organization and say, all right, these are the KPIs we're going to measure, right? And my trainers, if you don't 100% get it, just ask the revenue leaders, what are some leading indicators of success? They'll get it. What are some lagging indicators? What are the KPIs we're going to measure? And what does success look like? And don't take the request if they can't answer. I used to sign internal contracts that said, yep, here's what we're all going to do. Here's what success looks like. I commit as a sales leader to come to this, to support it and to coach it. And I commit as an enablement leader that I will build it. I will train it. Here's the time we're committing. Like, this isn't just so many revenue leaders. Sorry, folks, you got to stop doing this. Hey, I need negotiation training. Could that happen tomorrow? Yeah, just throw it at the beginning of the sales meeting. So I'll give you 5 minutes. It's not how it works, right? So treat this as a contract, and your job is to help us increase that net return. And the sales leaders, folks, your job is to help us define what that is. And that's our next section, okay? How can we simplify the measurement? And by the way, shout out, as always, to Heather Fitzgerald, who's having these conversations and actually stole some of these tips from the slides to get us there. And I think that's really cool. So, all right. Talk to us about leading and lagging, and let's get some examples here.
Yeah, and I think just following on your comments, there's no way to do this, right? So our goal today is to give you multiple ideas and frameworks that you can adapt and make right for your organization and for your priorities. Another tip is don't boil the ocean, right? There's many things you can measure, but alignment, to your point, of the revenue team around what are the key bottlenecks or what are the most important things to be measuring right now will also help you succeed, right? So I think it's easy to get lost and overwhelmed with the amount of things you can measure, but start small, get alignment with the revenue team, and you'll see better results. And I think one good framework here is the leading and lagging indicators. And I think getting alignment on that for the key initiatives is really critical, right? So when we think about leading indicators, it's metrics that predict that future performance, right? Or potential for future success. So we talked a little bit about, hey, are they attending the training, right? Are they rating it highly, right? Are they engaged, right? Are they participating? These are all good leading indicators for a training program. For coaching,
However,
are they showing
there's
up,
also
right?
there's also revenue leading indicators. Okay,
Correct.
so that's good on the enablement side, but when you flip to the revenue side, anything before the sale is a leading indicator. Are they having more conversations? Are they doing more demos? Are they getting higher conversion to stage 3? Are they sending more quotes? Okay. Anything before the contract is signed is a leading indicator. So look at both sides of that, and you want to measure both sides.
Correct. Exactly. You'll see that in an example here, right? Meetings with buyers, for instance, right? More conversations with buyers. Are those going up or down, right? As a result of some of your programs. So if we dive into coaching, which we know is a big pain point. So think of that as a use case or an area to measure within the broad spectrum of revenue enablement. So you can start to look at calls and deals coached, coaching sessions per rep, manager participation rate, right? If these things are not happening, hone in on that and try to solve that before you try to make the case for the lagging indicators, because chances are that's not your problem, right? Your problem is, having the managers actually be engaged or the reps being participating in the things that, matter.
You got it. You got it. And my trainers, I know you're frustrated with some of the things that Deniz has on this screen, right? We hear it loud and clear from you every single time we do this. And if you were to meet with folks ahead of time and do this leadership level kickoff and agreement, whether you make them sign a contract in blood or not, you'll say, here are the things we're going to look at. What are you going to measure? Here's what we're going to measure. We're going to measure the manager attendance rate at our training. We're going to measure how many coaching sessions are happening. That gets measured, gets done. And if the enablement team and the revenue teams are looking at whether or not managers are coaching what you're training and they know it's being measured. Last time we did this, Heather was shouting out, I love Factor 8 because they literally force my managers to coach, but that's how we do it. We set the expectation up front. We give feedback. We require them to come to that training. We report whether they do or not. And then we give them the tools. I'll show that you in a second to make it fast and easy for them to support us afterwards. And that's the key. Totally. All right. So here's another one from Deniz about leading and lagging. What do we have here?
Digital selling is another emerging area, right? So are your reps and your sellers really using all the tools at their disposal to engage their buyer, right? So are they sharing that information with their customers via email? Are they sharing it in digital sales rooms? Are they getting more engagements with the buying committee? As we know that the buying committee has now gone from 5 to 6 people to upwards of 10 people per Gartner estimates, right? So are you really, multi-threading within an account and generating more sort of stakeholders as a leading indicator for success, right? Are you uncovering those people, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on, Zoom Info or whatever tools that you're using? So are you really like uncovering the whole buying committee as a leading indicator for digital selling success? And are you
Okay.
seeing that result translate as a lagging indicator? And I think a good way to think about this is also cohort analysis, right? So look at the people who are exhibiting the behaviors and the skills in a good way, and look at their success rate, right? And then look at the people who aren't, or people who aren't actually participating in the training or the coaching. What is their win rate? What is their sales cycle length? What is their quota attainment rate look like compared to their peers who aren't really exhibiting some of the behaviors?
I think that's interesting. All right, we have a cheat sheet next. Here we go. Look at that. Some things you can pick out in each of these areas. And it was interesting when we said, which part of enablement is your biggest challenge? Everybody who answered had a different section of the circle. So here are a few things you can steal in each of these different areas. Dennis, any big highlights you want to call out?
I think my highlight here is that these are just things to get you started, right? Some of these are not going to apply to you. You're going to be like, like that's not really something that makes sense for me. I think the point is just have the framework, right? You got leading and lagging. You've got the 5 components of revenue enablement. You, along with your sales leader, or if you're in marketing, with your enablement leader, you guys should come together and really define this, right, for your organization and say, you know what, we're going to focus on launches and rollouts because, we're launching that new product in a couple of months. So guess what? We should focus there. We're not going to try to boil the ocean and measure everything, right? So align on a framework, pick your swim lane that you want to start in, show success and how you're able to demonstrate ROI there, and then move out and scale.
So let
That
me
would be
ask
my
a
tip.
specific question for Heather's behalf. She's saying, when you're talking about digital engagement, what do you mean? And I think we're looking at this content messaging, right? The adoption of the content, the views of the content shares, right? Prospects viewing content. So Heather, you're looking at the leading indicators in your last 2 boxes on the right here.
Correct. Yeah. And I would say also, as we know, selling via Zoom is very different than selling in person as well, right? Some of the skills and, behaviors that you have to exhibit, and potentially, the approach to the meeting can be completely different, as well as leveraging, to your point, technology to kind of get your message into an organization, whether that's sharing content or creating digital portals for them to actually understand your solution and understand the value that you bring to the table. I think using these tools and technologies and approaches the right way, right, is a key component in this digital age.
So again, the tip is take 1 or 2 of these. Now, if you're really looking at how are you impacting the roles, here's a list from the Factor 8 point of view. Now, again, we're focusing mostly on those skills and improving these, but when we're measuring results of what we're doing with skills development, here are some of the KPIs we're partnering with clients to measure. One of the first ones, it's the simplest one. It's just straight up activity. When folks feel confident, they pick up the phone, right? How many outbound dials were happening before? How many were happening after? When you look at conversation length, I might get somebody on the phone, but I can't keep them there. That's a great leading indicator. Inbound callbacks mean you're being compelling, right? Hello, if you're driving inbound calls, that's huge. Then you've got KPIs from dial to connect. You've got dial to connect to conversation. I like conversations over 3 or 5 minutes. It means I'm not just getting blown off or getting a voicemail. Those are all KPIs you can look at. I like for BDRs and SDRs, not just what is my call to meetings booked, but what % of those meetings show. That's showing engagement because people are showing up to those meetings. Are they qualified? Is it quality? All of these things are great at that BDR, SDR role. So my sales leaders, if you're not already looking at these things, you're welcome. There's some great things. Pick 1 or 2 that you're talking about right now, because the enlightened frontline manager goes beyond activity and results. This land in between are KPIs, and that's where the magic happens. My enablement trainers, you may not recognize all of these, but stick 1 or 2 in your pocket and go ask the frontline people if they're looking at it. Check for it on dashboards. It's okay to say, hey, if we do this right, will this training affect your KPI conversions over 5 minutes? You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. You fish a little bit. And like sometimes you use a wide net, like Amy Mary's comment. Hello, my friend. Hey, what does great look like? But sometimes you use a specific lure when you're fishing, right? Is this going to affect our quality show rate KPI? Will this affect our talk time? Oh, good. All right. So here's the same thing you can do with your account executives. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with this, very often a BDR, SDR hands off to an account executive. When you have somebody doing lead generation or appointment setting, right? They're sort of the top of the funnel and they're booking appointments for your more senior folks. You guys saw that we have a certification coming up on people trying to move from BDR to AE. It's a big jump. A ton of skills happen in this jump. Well, they too have to have longer talk times with clients, right? Those could be on Zooms and demos or even just calls. But how long are they lasting? How many of them are converting to the next steps? And of course, it's so hard to fill the top of the funnel right now. A lot of A's are responsible for generating their own leads as well. So how engaged were they during the sales conversation? What's the deal size, right? How are those discovery skills working? And how are they doing on penetrating different product lines? All of these are educated guesses and questions to bring to that contracting conversation, that needs analysis discussion and partnership discussion.
Yeah, and Heather in the chat is asking, what is quality skills score and quality engagement score? Maybe we can do a quick kind of deep
Thank
dive.
you for that. Yeah. Heather, you're a Factor 8 client, so this one's an easy answer for you. You get your call coaching feedback forms. And if you're using a conversational intelligence tool, you load it in. Otherwise, you score them. When we have, here's what that means, folks. Let me translate that for you. When you have one hymn sheet of what good looks like, the organization can add call quality to KPIs. That is a great big deal. It almost never happens because every manager is out there grading something different, right? We want more coaching to happen, but 9 out of 10 times, the manager is not coaching what you want them to be in, right? We didn't have time to study it. We don't know exactly what good looks like. Dennis thinks it looks better than I did, right? Heather's measuring tone. I'm in there looking for, customer engagement. But when we all rally around what good looks like in this area, right? And we all are speaking the same language. Now call quality is a gorgeous leading indicator. We all have seen reps where there's a difference between a skill and a will, right? This kid works so hard, but God, he's awful on the phone. Well, it's hard to get that guy coached up or out if you don't have it quantifiable. And that's what this does for you. So use those call feedback forms. Make sure everybody is. And if you can, Heather, institutionalize it through process or tools. Now, I know that sounded weird, so I'm going to explain that in better real person language. Instead of letting each manager use those forms or not in their one-on-ones, when you institutionalize it, it means you make everybody doing it and you pull it up and out of the one-on-ones into something that is more visible. The process of that may be that they're rolling those up into a leadership meeting. The process of that may be that those are getting rolled up into rep individual development plans. When you institutionalize it with a tool, it may be that that's going into dashboards. It could be going into gamification. It could be going into your CI, conversational intelligence tool, your call recording tools, right? You get to decide what good looks like. Make sure, enablement people, that what you've put down as what to look for in this skill you're training is showing up over here where managers are grading their reps. So you get to customize what goes into Gong or Chorus or Exec Vision or any of those different tools. Align those, institutionalize it so that quality and skills can be a part of everyday conversation when we're talking about sales results. That legitimizes what we're doing and pulls us into everyday conversations and subtly changes the culture and the mindset of sales leaders who think everything can be solved with more bodies or more dials or more tools. And I love my sales leaders, but come on, we do that. We make that mistake. It is a rare person who says, oh, well, what if we made everybody better? And so that's what we're all hoping for as enablement leaders. My soapbox has gotten so high, it's going to take 3 steps to get down off it now, Dennis. Sorry about that.
It was
Thank you for
fantastic,
asking the question. That was cool.
I think you were spot on there, and it ties it back to what we kicked off with, right? We talked about time and sellers being drowned in tools. And again, Allego's a tool company, but I'll say this, right? A lot of companies buy tools expecting it to solve their problems because they don't have a good process in place yet, right? So if you don't have a good process and an approach, a tool can't scale that, right? A tool is good at scaling process and a mental model, right? And making it easier. But it's so important to get this alignment and the good process in place and then find a tool that fits that process, right? But I think that's why we're spending so much time here, because this is really what matters to lift your sales performance.
It does. And they're all important to it, right? We've got to teach the skills, we've got to change the process, and we've got to get the tool to make it fast and easy. And if we do that out of order, we don't necessarily get the right adoption. So
Right.
Dennis and I are bookending this, right? Like the skills and the tools that make these things happen and embedded into the culture, as Heather said.
Right.
Okay, here's a list of things for your account managers or your customer success folks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because you guys are going to get these slides, and you're so welcome to ask me questions if there's one on here that you don't know. But for those of you who are yawning during this KPI section, I want to move a little bit faster. And our sales managers, folks, it's not just their percent to quota, it's their percent of team to quota. That is the biggest differentiator we got to look at. You mentioned cohorts earlier, Dennis, and I love that too. The average ramp time of their new hires. That's going to tell you if they're doing what they're supposed to. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about maximizing your training improvement, or pardon me, your training investment here. I was trying to read the questions in the comments at the same time, but I'm going to come back to those. Dennis, you can have them in the meantime, because I've got the first slide here.
Yeah.
I just want to level set for a second. Give me a hell yeah in chat if you've ever studied human performance. Human performance improvement, I found 20 something years ago when I built my first enablement organization, and I was starting to get too many requests, which is the problem we all dream of when we're in those organizations where we're like, hello, enablement over here, let us help, right? Like we'd proven that we were good, and now everybody wanted training to fix their problems. And I was like, you know what? It's not always a training issue. And that's the point of this slide. When you're partnering together, my revenue leaders out there, okay, you own a lot of these. The expectations, that's sales. The skills and the knowledge, that's enablement. The feedback and the measurement, what Dennis and I have been yapping about for the last 50 minutes is that that's a partnership, right? Pulling together the motivation for these folks, creating the motivating atmosphere, that's back in you. Revenue, reward and recognition, mostly revenue. We'd love to partner. Compensation and tools and resources, frontline leaders, that's out of our hands. But revenue leaders, it's not out of yours, right? Do they have the tools and resources that they need? Does your comp plan fight what you're trying to make happen? Does your contest reward only top performers? Is the expectation that you will always be doing something different than this training is trying to? You got to check all of these before you go in and engage and measure that success. So I'm liking my yeses in there, Athena. All right. Dennis is going to talk us through some best practices for maximum retention. And I'm going to just preamble this really quick. If you want results, they have to actually apply. If you want them to actually apply, they actually have to retain, right? They have to understand what to do and when to do it, and then actually go do it so that we can measure results. So when we're talking about retention, that's the key, because the forgetting curve tells us, right? If it's bad training, if it's not easy to use, if you don't make this fast and easy for me, I'm going to forget 90% of what you told me to do by the end of the week. So these are important. Pay attention. Even if you're a sales leader, even if you're a marketing leader, right? All of this is key.
Completely. Yeah. And I think you talked about, you gave an example, right? One of your clients, they spent so much money on all this training and e-learning, and hey, why isn't it working? Right. And I think it's so, easy for us to get sort of locked into stages 1 and 2, right? Leading up to that training event and that training day. And we spend so much effort on that. And like stages 3, 4, 5 almost is our time to breathe. But actually stages 3, 4, 5 is our time to sprint, right? Because that's really where the impact is made on your organization and on your sales team. Because the forgetting curve tells us you're going to forget almost all of that the same day or the day after, right? So the best practice is to actually launch that reinforcement program that day or the day after, enroll and set that expectation in your teams. And a good way to reinforce is not just through visual, right? And not just seeing the material or practicing on flashcards, but actually practicing in real life situations, right? Whether you do that where you pair up manager and rep or peers together to practice in certain situations, that's going to aid in your memory retention. But technology can help here as well. Tools like Allego and others have ways in which you can start to now use generative AI, right? And practice with simulations and technology generated avatars of buyers in your own situations, inspired and created from your own actual calls. So there's ways you can weave in technology into this, but you don't have to, right? So you can start small by actually implementing the expectation in the program that they're going to not only look at the material after the training, but they're going to actually apply that, right? And measure the way in which they're doing that, right? Because if they're not doing that reinforcement activity, you can start to have that conversation among the the sales leaders and the enablement group to say, look, if they're not going to do this activity, we can't expect results, right? And that's really how you can tie it back to sort of the ROI equation. And this really goes back to sort of like all the different modalities of training that need to be incorporated for a sales rep to be successful, right? It can't just be that ILT and e-learning, right? You got to have the practice, right? You got to give them that opportunity to actually, use those skills and develop that confidence and fluency, then certify against that what good looks like. We talked a lot about that, right? Agreeing on that certification benchmark, and then retaining that information through reminders over time, right? Checks over time, and then giving sort of that the coaches that avenue to actually see how's that being applied in the field. Does it match what we thought it would, right? And giving that developmental coaching and deal coaching and call coaching feedback to make sure that they're continually improving. So I think just making sure you've got all modalities in the mix to make sure that you're going to maximize your ROI and all the effort that you're putting into your programs.
Do you use these steps for more than just the skills training? Are you using these for some of those, like the launches and tools, and right? These steps apply to all the different areas of enablement?
Absolutely. I would say for knowledge training too, right? In certain sectors where that's really important. For instance, if you're in the life sciences or medical devices space, like clinical expertise is really important, right? You got to know what a drug does. You got to know what the surgical tools do. So sometimes knowledge training is very important, sometimes more important than skills training, right? Because they got to be talking to highly experienced professionals. So I would say it applies to both skill-based training and also knowledge training.
I like that. I like that. So when I think about whether it's skills or not, when I think about engagements from enablement, regardless if it's a sales skill like we do at Factor 8 or the use of a tool, what we're really talking about here is behavior change, right? Which is why I love human performance improvement. So Google that and steal that as well. And if you really want someone to change behavior, this is the framework that I love. It's called BLISS. You got to start with the buy-in. Okay. And this is where enablement and sales, we need to partner. We need to figure out what's in it for them. We need sales leadership to say it's important, and we need to set the expectations. That's one of those pieces of the HPI, human performance improvement pie I just showed you. Now, I want to talk for a second. Let me go find that huge soapbox and climb up on it. Learning does not mean telling. Learning does not mean video. Learning does not really even mean webinar. We're sharing information, we're doing some edutainment, but when you really dig into how adults learn, being told isn't gonna cut it. We have to interact, right? Our brain, by recalling something, you said flashcards. I wish that like my kids still use flashcards. They don't train that way. Recalling something is 5 to 10 times more effective than rereading it, which is why interaction is key. You can have that in e-learning and synchronous e-learning. We've built it in to everything we do at Factory, but it is even more effective when we practice, right? And that's the key. So interaction in learning, these two, they have to come together. There can be some telling, but it will only 10% will live a week later unless then you are going and interacting, applying it, doing the role play. My training geeks will love the Bloom's taxonomy language here, right? The left side is about I recognize it. The right side is about I can actually synthesize. I can use it on the job in combination with other skills. This is why it kills me when I see new hire training programs. They're like, Monday, we're doing product. Tuesday, we're doing systems. Wednesday, we're doing sales. Thursday, we're doing systems. It's like, come on. We have to learn to do them together. Why? Because what wires and fires together in the brain, right? If they wire together, they fire together. We have to use them together because later in the job, we have to. I'm sorry, you don't get to only talk about your product on Mondays and use your systems on Tuesdays. We have to do it all at the same time. So if we can teach it at the same time, what a way that goes into reducing ramp time, right? And increasing that retention and application, which, what are the name of the games for actual results and behavior change? They have to do it, and to do it, they have to remember it, okay? Now, here's where our revenue teams come in, our marketing teams, our communications, everybody has to partner in the support. Just like you were saying, you got to refresh it, certifying it happens here, coaching it happens here. But when we just throw it out and then don't talk about it anymore, my brain replaces it with newer, fresh information. This is where we get the flavor of the month stuff. This is where we get the frustration with the enablement teams, with my sales managers out there. Okay. We need your help and your partnership to support it. I give you a little extra credit when you can make that fun. Ongoing communications, putting it into contests, pulling it through the culture, institutionalizing it in tools, right? Build out the career paths, get enablement, get quality and skills up in your celebration and your hoopla on your ambition boards and your dashboards. At Factor8, we do this with a learn, show, prove model. Okay. If your training e-learning looks like one thing and it's a video, you have some improvement to do, right? Underneath each one of these is our tools, activities, real recorded calls, coaching cheat sheets. Okay. So you can have a class, a skill. The course chasers are the refreshers. The toolkit is what I use to do the rest of that bliss model, the synthesis, the application on the job, the feedback, the coaching. This is what Heather was talking about. We use to literally force our managers to do that coaching. Because what it comes down to, folks, is if you want folks to engage, you got to have the big two. It's got to be fast and it's got to be easy. Sales managers aren't ignoring you because they don't like you or they don't believe in training. They're ignoring you because it's the biggest, busiest job in the world. I remember that so vividly. And it's only gotten harder now that our people are working from home and they're virtual. So tools are critical. Tools they can use in their existing meetings. Don't make them do more things and new things. Help make what they're already doing faster. There you are, Heather. I put you right in my slides. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So I want to give you a couple takeaways. There's all kinds of free tools and downloads too. And speaking of free, you guys are going to love this. So I'm congratulating myself here. This is a big deal. I don't think we have this. When I talked to you last time, Dennis, Factor 8 has now been approved to be part of the Registered Apprenticeship Program, which means we're offering not just certifications, but federal certifications backed and funded by grants. So if you have a whole bunch of salespeople that have not had training since new hire, but your budgets were cut and you need digital selling skills, we got your back. Please go fill out this form. We've got about 200 folks starting this process this month. We're getting so much great feedback on this. It's really exciting. I think this is it's something that's going to help us hire and retain better qualified salespeople and help them stay longer and build careers. And we're just really thrilled to have been approved for this and to be part of this program. And so many happy companies coming back to us saying, I lost my budgets. Thank you for this. We can do it together. All right. And I told you I would tell you about that trainer certification for my enablement people. So my idol and I, Sherry Levitin, are doing this together. It's October 8th and 15th. You get 90 days access to all of her online content and all of mine, including those tools. You get a private coaching call. We're going to put a cohort together and we right-size this program. It is much less expensive. It's under $1,000 and much less time. So go to this link. Amy, I'm sure, is chatting it in. All right. Oh boy. I've got a minute or two for questions, but first I'm going to go to this QR code where you can download the recording and resources. So Dennis, did you put your ROI calculator in there again?
Oh yeah, it's in there, right? So we have some resources for you, the cheat sheet that I presented with all the different metrics, which you can again tailor and make your own. That's the point. We actually also created a very simple Excel ROI calculator, which, you can edit that. You can make it your own. You get started small, right? You don't have to make a massive technology investment to prove ROI out of the gate. I think what we talked about today is align on the framework, align on the mental model, start small, and use technology and tools like Allego to scale it once you feel like you're on the right path. And the digital room also is powered by Allego. Some of you asked, what are we thinking about? What does digital selling mean? I would encourage all of you to check out digital sales rooms as a new technology category to give your sellers an advantage in the market, right? Not only are sellers now selling via phone and Zoom, but there are new ways in which they can engage buyers by creating these web pages that are bespoke for their deals and for that buying committee. So go check it out.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot more about digital sales rooms. It is definitely up and coming, but it's not all Allego does. So you'll have a chance to learn more about all the different ways that tool will help you engage and help your sellers engage. We've got some Factor 8 resources in there as well, ways to partner with your sales leaders, language to use, how to prove and get budget. So go do lots of free downloads. I love the fact that you built the tool in Excel and folks can just edit it, right? It's not part of an online calculator somewhere. You just download it and customize it.
Right. Absolutely.
We got 30 seconds left for a final question or comment. Anything, Mike? Anything you want to say? Anybody out there? I love that. Heather's looking for some connections. I really appreciate the positive feedback, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you very much. Any final words, Dennis?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, alignment of the revenue team, right? I think we had a representation of marketing, sales, enablement here. I think it's our job to come together as a revenue team and align on how are we going to measure and prove value together. And I would say, don't boil the ocean, start small.
Love it. Really good feedback. Start with those meetings and enablement folks and revenue folks. Let's reach across the aisle. Let's book a meeting to talk a little bit about strategy, what our goals are, how we can support each other, what we're going to measure to find that successful. Always here, if you've got questions, you can find us on LinkedIn. My email address is lb for Lauren Bailey at factor8.com. I would love to hear from you. And we appreciate you so much for being here. Let us know how we can assist. That's our job.
Thank you.
All right. Boom.
Day.
Top of the hour. Thanks, everybody. Have a great one. We'll see you next time. I hope we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.